For more on this situation, I want to bring on Corey Lewandowski, an advisor to the 2020 Trump campaign and the president's former campaign manager during the 2016 election. Corey, when we look at what's going on right now with John Bolton, his latest push to get his book out, and the president engaging with that, what do you make of this whole thing? Do you think that the president should be engaging with Bolton, or do you think he should just kind of let Bolton do his thing and let it kind of blow over on itself?
Well, I think the Justice Department has to make the decision. If John Bolton is releasing information which is classified in any nature, then they have an obligation to ensure that that information is not disseminated to the public. I know there was an initial review of John's book, and there's been some additional consideration that there's information in there which should not be publicly available. If that's the case, or if John Bolton attempted to leak or disseminate any classified information through non-proper channels, that is a punishable offense by up to 10 years in jail. So I think it's incumbent on the Justice Department to ensure that any information that's in that book is available and accessible to the public if it is not classified.
And I think it's even a little bit more alarming when you lay it out that way, that it's someone who's coming from a national security apparatus. It's not just someone who was a prior member of the administration. And on top of that, too, I mean, the hypocrisy is there. I've said it that John Bolton is the same guy that said that Chelsea Manning, for example, should get the death penalty for leaking classified information. I mean, it's really a big show of hypocrisy when we talk about exactly what's going on right now. But when we come to the president as well, I mean, there's multiple things facing the country as well. He recently took a step when it comes to police reforms as well. Do you think that was a good first step for the president to really meet the challenge of what's happening in the country right now, but without going as far to call for the defunding of police or anything like that, while still showing support for our nation's law enforcement?
Well, the men and women who serve on what I call the thin blue line, which is, as a former police officer, what we call that. It's the line between good and evil, and this notion that we're going to defund these hardworking people who go out and risk their lives every day to protect Americans is absolutely insane. To put it in perspective, 250 million calls were placed last year to 911. Those calls were responded to regardless of if the person was white, green, purple, orange, male, female, X, it didn't matter. Police respond every time they're called. And so are there some bad apples? Of course there are. Do those people deserve the right to face the penalties for the crimes that they committed? You bet they do. And I think what we've seen now in policing departments across this country is a need to have better training and better communication. But that by no means does that mean defund the police.
And it's an unfortunate thing, but it seems like our police officers only get the credit they deserve during times of crisis, times where they're putting their lives in the way of danger in order to make sure that we are protected, in order to make sure that we can experience these freedoms that we have. And I don't know, I just suggest to our viewers, maybe buy your local police department a pizza or something tonight, something to show that they are appreciated, because really they are. If you look at polls, I mean, the American people do have faith in the institution of our police departments. It's one of the few institutions that they actually do trust. So I think even though we're looking at what's going on in the media, I think it's important to remember where the average American actually does stand. And with that being said, former Vice President Joe Biden is saying that he does not want to defund the police. However, he is surrounded by a lot of people who are making those very calls. Do you fear that because he wants to be a vehicle for the Democratic establishment and the Democratic policies, that defunding the police may actually come into the equation?
Well, clearly, as Joe Biden considers who his vice presidential running mate is going to be, these are individuals who have advocated for the defunding of police. These are the people who have praised the marauders running through the streets and destroying personal property. Look, we are a nation of law and order. This is a president who stood up for law and order. This is a person who understands that the rule of law is paramount in this country. That's not to say you can't protest. Of course you can protest. But there is a way to do that, and throwing bricks through windows and looting buildings is not the proper way. So, while Joe Biden is not directly calling for the defunding of police, his advisors, his supporters, and many others are calling for that. And we know that Joe Biden of 2020 is very different than the Joe Biden of 2015, 2008, or 1995. And remember, it wasn't that long ago when Joe Biden was giving the eulogy at Robert Byrd's funeral, who at a period of time served as the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan of the state of West Virginia. So Joe Biden has to atone for that, as well as, his long-standing relationship with Senator Easton of Mississippi, who was known by the voice of the white South. Joe Biden has a lot of atonement to do, and this notion that he all of a sudden is going to support the police is one which I think is circumspect at best.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, too, because it wasn't too long ago where that was exactly what many Democratic presidential candidates were saying about Joe Biden. I mean, Kamala Harris came after him for his record on that very issue. Cory Booker came at him for his record on that very issue. I mean, those criticisms exist, but now it's kind of interesting to see, now that he is the Democratic presidential nominee, that all of a sudden it's not talked about too much in the media. So once we do get to debates, once we do get to the general election, do you think that police reforms is going to be a major issue? And do you think that the president should be focusing on Joe Biden's past when it comes to that issue?
Well, absolutely, the president should focus on this because Joe Biden has flip-flopped, more than John Kerry when he was on the sailboat. Okay, that's how often Joe Biden has flip-flopped, and the real truth is that Joe Biden has to answer for these things. This is a man who spent 36 years in the United States Senate, spent 8 years as the vice president, did nothing to improve race relations, could have done so, but chose not to, and now he's saying he wants to be the change agent. You can't do something for 40 years and then blame somebody else who's been in office for 3.5 and saying that they haven't accomplished it. Donald Trump has done more for the African-American community, whether it is creating empowerment zones, whether it's economic job opportunities, whether it's the First Step Act. There's a number of factors in 3 years of public office that has demonstrated that Donald Trump and the Republican Party do not take the African-American vote for granted, which is what the Democrats have done for the last 30 years. And Joe Biden has to answer for that.
And when you talk about Joe Biden's record, I mean, the only consistency is the fact that he's been inconsistent. I mean, we could talk about NAFTA, something he supported, then flipped on. The Iraq War, something he supported, and then flipped on. Social Security, he wanted to cut it, now flipped on that. I mean, it's a routine of that is really indicative of the entire Biden time in the Senate. And it's something, too, that, I mean, they brought it up during the primary. They don't want to talk about it now, them being the media, and it's something, too, that I know is going to come up during the general election. And if Joe Biden doesn't face that now, he's going to have a hard time facing it against President Trump on a debate stage. But Corey Lewandowski, I appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you for joining us.